There's a breaking point in every man. Even the most patient, the most gentle, the most understanding man has a line, and women, often without realizing it, test that line until it snaps. Not because they consciously want to create anger, but because they subconsciously want to feel your boundaries. A patient man doesn't start off angry. He starts off trying. He starts off believing that love is about tolerance, about flexibility, about giving the benefit of the doubt. He listens. He explains. He forgives. He gives second chances. And slowly, so slowly that he doesn't even notice it happening, his kindness is mistaken for weakness, and his silence is treated like permission. He watches the disrespect creep in like a slow leak under the door. The sarcasm, the passive aggressiveness, the entitlement, the withdrawal of affection, the constant testing, and because he's patient, he endures, until one day he doesn't. Women don't turn patient men into angry men overnight. It's death by 1,000 cuts. 1,000 dismissals, 1,000 micro-manipulations, 1,000 moments where the man had to swallow his truth just to keep the peace. And what does he get in return for his calm? More chaos. Because to a woman who is addicted to emotional stimulation, a calm man feels boring, so she provokes, she pushes, she pokes, not out of malice, but because she wants to feel something, and the patient man, still believing in the illusion of peaceful love, keeps trying to meet her halfway. But every time he does, he loses a piece of himself, and then eventually he becomes the thing she claims to hate, an angry, emotionally volatile man. But the truth is, she didn't just bring out the worst in him, she conditioned him to suppress his instincts so long that the only way out was eruption. The tragedy is that these men never wanted to be angry. These were the men who held doors open, who listened without interrupting, who gave without asking for anything in return. These were the men who tried to understand her moods, who tolerated her coldness, who explained themselves 10 times over just to avoid conflict. And for a while, they thought that was noble. That being endlessly patient would earn them love, respect, and reciprocity. But what they got instead was resentment. Because many women don't respect a man who tolerates everything. They admire a man who can set a boundary and enforce it. And when a woman realizes that a man will take her worst behavior without pushback, her subconscious doesn't see him as kind, it sees him as soft. And in the world of emotional survival, soft men get devoured. It always starts subtly. She's having a bad day, so she takes it out on him. He says nothing. She starts making jokes at his expense in front of friends. He laughs it off. She starts withholding affection, weaponizing intimacy, using silence as control. He assumes she just needs time, and with each act of disrespect, she watches how much he'll tolerate before he pushes back. But he doesn't push back because he's patient, because he wants to be the good guy, because he believes that enduring her chaos is the price of her love. But what he doesn't see is that this dynamic is reshaping both of them. She loses respect, and he loses himself. She sees him as a doormat, and he starts to see himself as invisible, until eventually, something inside him turns cold. He doesn't shout, he doesn't lash out, but the warmth is gone. The spark has died, the love has hardened into resentment. There's a reason why women often say he changed after a breakup. He didn't change, he evolved. He adapted to the environment she created. He became emotionally guarded because emotional openness got used against him. He became blunt because his soft words were ignored. He stopped giving because his generosity became expected. The patient man didn't become angry because he was unstable. He became angry because his patience was exploited. And that anger, though terrifying, is the final line of self-defense. It's the part of him that says, no more. It's not about yelling. It's about reclaiming his dignity. It's about recognizing that a man who sacrifices everything to please a woman eventually loses the very thing that made her love him in the first place, his masculine core. And once that's gone, there's no relationship left to save. The bitter irony is that many women don't even realize the part they played in his transformation. They see the anger, but not the provocation. They remember his outburst, but forget the months, sometimes years of emotional disrespect that preceded it. And when he finally snaps, when he finally raises his voice or walks away or stops caring, she plays the victim. She tells her friends, he changed. He used to be so sweet. And she believes it, because in her mind, his rage appeared out of nowhere. But the truth is, she was never paying attention to the quiet wars he fought behind the scenes. She didn't see the nights he sat awake, wondering what he did wrong. She didn't hear the prayers he whispered, hoping things would get better. She only sees the moment he stopped trying, and paints that moment as betrayal, never realizing it was her own betrayal that created it. What turns a calm man bitter isn't just the disrespect. It's the lack of appreciation. It's the fact that no matter how much effort he put in, it was never enough. He planned the dates, he paid the bills, he remembered the anniversaries. He held her when she cried and encouraged her when she doubted herself. And instead of gratitude, he got criticism. Instead of admiration, he got indifference. The more he gave, the more she took, and the less she saw. And so he learns kindness is invisible unless it's wrapped in dominance. She won't remember his patience, she won't respect his consistency, but the moment he withdraws, the moment he says no, the moment he stops catering to her every emotional whim, that's when she notices. And it's that realization that fuels the shift from love to resentment. Because he gave everything, and it still wasn't enough. Not because he lacked something, but because she never knew how to value what she had. The psychological toll this takes on a man is enormous. He begins to doubt himself. He wonders if he's too sensitive, too soft, too weak. He replays arguments in his head, trying to understand how it all fell apart. He starts to believe that maybe he's the problem, that if he just tried a little harder, loved a little deeper, tolerated a little more, maybe things would return to how they were. But what he doesn't see is that the problem was never how he loved, it was who he loved. A woman who doesn't value peace will always crave chaos, and when chaos becomes the norm, calmness feels wrong. That's how women train men out of patience. They turn kindness into background noise, consistency into monotony. And when the man finally adjusts to survive, he's accused of becoming cold. But he's not cold, he's just tired of bleeding for someone who never brought a bandage. One of the most dangerous games women play is pushing a man to his emotional limit just to see if he breaks. They'll test his composure, not to learn from it, but to challenge it. They'll say things that are designed to sting. They'll ignore his efforts just to observe his reaction. They'll flirt with disrespect, not because they want another man, but because they want to feel power over the one they have. And the patient man, who sees love as sacred, doesn't know how to handle that. At first, he tries to communicate. Then he tries to explain. Then he pleads. And when none of it works, when his emotional currency has been completely devalued, he doesn't explode, he shuts down, his laughter disappears, his touch fades, his energy retracts, and suddenly, she starts complaining that he's not the same. But she doesn't realize he's still the same man. He just gave up on trying to be seen. Men don't become emotionally distant overnight. They become that way after being emotionally punished for their closeness. They become distant after learning that vulnerability is used against them. After learning that affection is not reciprocated, but expected. After realizing that their effort will never be enough for someone who is addicted to emotional drama. And so they start to retreat, not out of malice, but out of self-preservation. The man who once planned everything stops planning. The man who once spoke his heart now gives short replies. The man who once touched her with passion now barely touches her at all. And she sits there, confused, blaming his change, instead of recognizing her own behavior. But this is what women do to patient men. They mistake his tolerance for passivity, his kindness for naivety, his calmness for lack of fire. And when the fire finally dies, they act surprised by the cold. You see, there's something profoundly heartbreaking about being the man who was willing to endure the storms, only to be abandoned when the sun finally came out. Women will praise patience in theory, but in practice, many are drawn to tension, to the unpredictability, the emotional roller coaster that keeps them feeling something, anything. The patient man is consistent. He shows up, he listens, he doesn't retaliate with ego or revenge. And ironically, that very consistency is interpreted as weakness. So she pokes, she stirs, she creates storms out of silence just to see if he'll roar. And when he doesn't, when he remains calm, she grows bored. Until one day he finally does roar. And instead of realizing that she provoked the storm, she tells the world that he became the storm. That's the manipulation. That's the rewriting of history. And that's why patient men turn into cold men. they realize too late that kindness is punished far more than it is rewarded. This is the tragedy most women never see. They don't witness the nights he lays in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what else he could do. They don't hear the sighs he lets out when he sees her pulling away, emotionally checking out while still expecting him to play the role of her emotional sponge. They don't feel the ache in his chest when she compliments other men, but ignores his sacrifices. To her, he's just there, always there. And that permanence becomes invisible. But inside, the damage accumulates. The resentment simmers. The realization dawns. Nothing I do will ever be enough. And that's the moment the shift begins. He goes from trying to win her heart to trying to protect his own, from leaning in to stepping back. And when that shift becomes permanent, it's not because he stopped loving her, it's because he started loving himself more. Men raised with integrity, loyalty, and quiet strength often find themselves blindsided in relationships. They were taught to be protectors, providers, patient listeners. They were taught that love means sacrifice, but no one prepared them for the modern landscape of emotional manipulation, where patience is met with provocation, where silence is mistaken for weakness, and where love is only returned if it's exciting enough to feel like a movie. So the patient man finds himself twisted up inside, trying to balance his masculinity with his tenderness, trying to love her fully while she tests the very boundaries of that love. And as time goes on, he realizes she doesn't want peace. She wants chaos that feels like passion. And he either plays along betraying his core, or he walks away, betraying his heart. Either way, he loses, until one day he stops playing. And when that day comes, there's no drama, no fight, just a door closing silently for good. One of the hardest pills to swallow for a patient man is accepting that his emotional endurance doesn't make him more loved. It often makes him more used. Because when you're patient with someone who's emotionally reckless, all you're doing is giving them permission to keep wounding you. You become the sponge for their trauma, their insecurity, their self-destruction, and in her mind, your ability to tolerate her storms becomes your identity. She starts expecting it, demanding it, testing it, and what begins as love turns into a performance, a one-man show of emotional resilience. But even the strongest men crack. Even the most grounded man eventually looks in the mirror and wonders, what am I doing this for? And the answer is never satisfying. Because the truth is, he wasn't being loved, he was being drained. And when he finally sees it, he doesn't become evil. He becomes unavailable. And nothing scares a woman more than a man who stops responding to her chaos. What's often misunderstood is that a man doesn't need to yell to be angry. His silence can be deafening. His absence, a statement louder than any argument. Women confuse loud passion with real love, but overlook the quiet withdrawal of a man who's been pushed too far. When a patient man checks out emotionally, he doesn't announce it. He just stops explaining himself, stops trying, stops hoping, and it's in that void that she finally sees the damage she caused. But by then, it's too late. He's emotionally gone. His heart is closed. His love no longer available. And no matter how many tears she cries, how many apologies she whispers, he won't be the same. Not because he's bitter, but because he finally understands what she didn't love should never require you to suffer in silence. Love should never punish peace, and any relationship that demands your sanity as payment for her affection is not love, it's emotional slavery. The turning point is always subtle. It doesn't happen in a single explosive moment. It happens slowly, quietly, as a man chips away at his own patience, trying to hold together a relationship that's breaking him from the inside. At first he tells himself it's just a phase, that she's just emotional, that if he holds on a little longer, she'll come around. But she doesn't. In fact, she becomes more reckless, more entitled, more addicted to the comfort of his silence. And every time he forgives without a conversation, every time he swallows his truth to avoid another emotional landmine, she learns that his boundaries are elastic. She learns that he'll bend, not break, until one day he breaks. Not with violence, not with rage, but with indifference. The fire in his eyes goes out, the hope in his chest withers, and the man who once gave her everything now gives her nothing, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. It's a strange experience to become a ghost in a relationship you used to feel alive in. The patient man knows this better than anyone. He walks into rooms and feels her coldness. He tries to start a conversation and is met with sarcasm or silence. He brings peace and receives chaos, and it slowly kills something inside him. Not his love, but his willingness. That's what dies first. His willingness to try, to explain, to fix, because he realizes that no matter what he does, it will never be enough for a woman who only sees value in conflict. For her, his calm is a challenge. His restraint is a weakness. His presence is expected, not appreciated. And when that realization finally crystallizes, he doesn't make threats. He doesn't give ultimatums. He simply stops showing up emotionally. He becomes a quiet storm, still standing, but no longer reachable. And in that silence, she finally hears all the things he never said. One of the cruelest things a woman can do to a patient man is confuse his kindness for foolishness. She believes that because he doesn't retaliate, he must not be aware. That because he forgives, he must not see what she's doing. But make no mistake, he sees everything. Every dismissive look, every manipulative word, every moment of emotional withdrawal. He just chooses not to respond with immaturity. But that choice comes at a cost, because while he may win the moral battle, he loses the emotional war. He ends up internalizing the pain, bottling up the disappointment, carrying the weight of a relationship that demands everything but gives very little in return. And when he finally walks away, it's not because of a single betrayal, it's because of 1,000 little ones. And no apology, no realization, no last-minute tears will ever resurrect the man who died inside her chaos. There's an old saying, don't mistake my silence for acceptance. The patient man lives by this. Even if she doesn't recognize it, she thinks because he stays, he approves. Because he listens, he agrees. Because he doesn't react, he's unaffected. But nothing could be further from the truth. His silence is a scoreboard. Every time she disrespects him, it gets recorded. Every emotional outburst, every manipulation, every time she plays victim to escape accountability, it all gets filed away, and eventually the file is full. That's when he's done, not angry, not loud, just done. And when that moment comes, she'll panic, she'll beg, she'll promise change. But he won't move, because he's already left her in his mind 1,000 times before his feet ever walked out the door. That's the real heartbreak for her, because she thought she was breaking him. But really, she was building a version of him that no longer needs her. A patient man turning cold is not a transformation, it's a revelation. It's who he becomes when he stops betraying himself to accommodate her dysfunction. He doesn't stop loving easily. He stops when love becomes self-destruction. He doesn't stop communicating randomly. He stops when his words fall on deaf ears. He doesn't stop showing affection overnight. He stops when his affection is mocked, minimized, or manipulated. This man, the one who gave her 1,000 chances, eventually learns the darkest truth. Love without respect is poison. And in a world where women test men to see how much they can get away with, the patient man becomes a mirror. He reflects back to her all the damage she's done, not through revenge, but through absence. And in that absence, she faces the one thing she can't manipulate: consequences. And by then, the man she once took for granted has become the man she'll never forget, but will never have again. The irony is, most women don't even realize what they're doing until it's far too late. They're not always consciously malicious, they're conditioned. Conditioned to test, to push, to see how far they can stretch the limits before something snaps. But in their quest to feel emotionally safe, they end up making the safest man feel emotionally homeless. They break the very foundation they were meant to build upon. And by the time they wake up to the reality of their actions, they find themselves alone, staring at the absence of a man who never wanted to leave, but was left with no other choice. The patience that once defined him is now a wall she can't climb. The gentleness that once healed her is now reserved for someone who hasn't tried to destroy it. And her biggest regret isn't just losing him, it's realizing he gave her every chance to be different, and she used every one of them to prove she couldn't be. It's painful to witness how often this story repeats itself. You see good men, real men, slowly unravel, not because they're weak, but because they believed in love too much. They believed that if they stayed calm, stayed kind, stayed consistent, they'd be rewarded with loyalty, appreciation, and peace. But instead, they became emotional punching bags for women who were addicted to drama, to chaos, to emotional highs and lows. And these men, who once smiled with ease and loved with depth, start to lose that spark. They become closed off, suspicious, hardened, not just toward one woman, but toward all women, because betrayal doesn't just hurt, it changes you. And now the man who once opened doors and hearts with the same ease walks through life guarded, unwilling to risk becoming that broken version of himself again. That's what she took from him, not just his love, but his trust in love. Every man must learn this truth. Your patience is a gift, not a guarantee. When a woman doesn't respect your calm, you owe her no more of it. When she uses your silence as a weapon against you, filling it with her own chaos, you don't owe her your peace. You are not obligated to stay in a relationship where you are being slowly eroded under the guise of emotional endurance. Love is not meant to be a test of how much pain you can take while still smiling. It's meant to be a sanctuary. And if she turns your patience into her playground of manipulation, you don't stay to prove how much you can handle. You leave to prove how much you respect yourself. Because a woman who truly values you will never mistake your stillness for weakness. She'll cherish it, protect it, and build a world around it, not set fire to it for the thrill of watching you burn. You were not born to be someone's emotional experiment. You were not created to be the calm she tries to shake just to feel something. You are a man, not a project, not a toy, not a prop in her drama. And if she can't recognize that, then your silence must speak louder than any argument ever could. There comes a time when the most powerful thing a man can do is walk away. Not with bitterness, not with hate, but with clarity. Because clarity is what frees you. It's what restores your soul after being drained by a woman who confused love with control, who used your patience as a test of your breaking point. The man who sees this clearly no longer needs closure. He no longer waits for apologies. He simply chooses peace. And in choosing peace, he becomes what every manipulative woman fears most. A man who sees through her, stands without her, and never looks back. So to every patient man reading this, understand your value. Your ability to stay calm in chaos is not a flaw, it's your power. But powers must be protected, not exploited. You were never meant to carry a relationship on your back while she throws stones from the passenger seat. You were meant to lead, to protect, to love, but not at the cost of your soul. The world needs more men like you. But you must know when to stop giving your light to someone who thrives in your darkness. You must know when to draw the line, not because you're giving up, but because you've finally woken up. A woman who turns your patience into pain does not deserve the version of you that was willing to suffer for her growth. Save that version for someone who doesn't need to break you just to feel alive. Because the strongest love isn't found in how much pain you can endure. It's found in how deeply you protect your peace.